What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another Trendsetters podcast. Today is going to be an agency insider episode, and it's not going to be talking to one of the bigger agencies in the world or a former professor as we had in the past, but we're going to keep it real and we're going to dive into Gen Z. Today I'm joined by Aneesh Dhawan. God damn it, did I pronounce that correctly?
That was actually perfect. That was great.
Shit. Okay. All right, Eric, as you're editing this, cut me back in right about now. Aneesh is the founder and CEO at PurPics and what's the right terminology? My bad.
Yeah, you can just say like a Gen Z insights platform.
Cool. I'll just go from the top. Sorry, Eric. What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another Trendsetters podcast. Today is going to be an agency insider episode, and it's not going to be chatting with a big, massive, behemoth agency or someone who's been a professor in the past, some of the episodes that you've seen in the past, but rather we're going to dive into Gen Z. And you're going to get to hear all about Gen Z, not just from my perspective, who you hear from way too often, but rather other fellow experts. So today I'm joined by Aneesh Dhawan, the founder and CEO at PurPics, a platform helping brands collect insights and data into all things Gen Z. Aneesh, it is a pleasure to have you on, my man. Thanks so much.
For sure, Jake. Thanks for having me. Super pumped to chat with you about Gen Z today.
Of course. So the first thing I want to start with, for those that don't know anything about PurPics, I'd love to get a sense and definition from you as to what it is you all do and how you help brands and ultimately reaching Gen Z.
Yeah, absolutely. So very simply, PurPics, our mission is to help brands better understand Gen Z consumers and really make customer-centric decisions through agile video feedback. So what we do is we help brands collect usually about 30 to 90 second long video responses from Gen Z consumers, and then our technology helps them really analyze and digest that data and really tell stories through that data and pull out rich insights. So that's what we are. We've been around for a couple of years. We started off, we had a robust kind of influencer marketing platform. And really over the last couple of years, that's really evolved into this consumer insights tool.
Yeah, and something I love about your own entrepreneurial journey and where you guys are at right now is obviously I'm looking all the time at things within the Gen Z insights realm. And I've always forever been like, I just don't know if it's there to the level that's needed and how data is collected, how it's stored, how it's managed. And so I love, the latest iteration and innovation from you and the team. And I know that's something I'm personally excited about because, ultimately what we saw with millennials and the misunderstanding there was a Ogilvy report at the beginning of 2020 all about how millennials lied and all the insights and data we thought we knew about millennials just simply wasn't true. And just as an example in that, like you look at the purpose-driven, that was said to be the purpose-driven generation. That's why they purchase products. But then you look at the data and they're purchasing the least amount based on actually purpose-driven of any generation. So even you have silent generation ordering maybe D2C products to nursing homes at a much higher rate than millennials. So that's an example of that. I love everything you're doing in that arena. And I know a lot of conversations I've had with brands, agencies, individuals, when thinking about reaching Gen Z, there's a lot of misconceptions and misinformation out there. So from your perspective, what are some of the misconceptions or maybe struggles that you often see with brands and their understanding of Gen Z?
Yeah, and love what you said about kind of, we like to think about it like we'd rather show you data rather than tell you data. So the more we can actually get video, the more we can actually get more qualitative data, the better. And what kind of inspired us to make this shift from influencer, a nano influencer platform to a more insights platform is when we were talking to these brands, there are just a ton of misconceptions there. Yeah. So that's kind of what pushes into consumer insights. I've definitely seen a few that come up a lot. I think the biggest one to just start off with from the top is people really put Gen Z into a box or into a certain bucket, when really what we're seeing with this generation is it's incredibly diverse, right? Someone in college versus someone that might have, gone to a 2-year college and university or is getting a degree online or taking one of those like Assembly or Udemy kind of online classes for coding. They're very different. And we're seeing that, a lot of people where a lot of brands tend to kind of bucket Gen Z consumers when instead they're actually very diverse. And you really got to understand that consumer really well in those different segments. I think the second one is what you hit on, and really what's really close. It's close to home for us because, behind our entire platform, it's all innovation driven. So what that means is we have about 60,000 Gen Z consumers on our platform. They're participating in different market research studies with these brands, and instead of getting, like a $5 or $10 gift card, what they're actually doing is raising money for a good cause. So they select a nonprofit on our platform, and we donate that money directly to that nonprofit. So one of the biggest misconceptions that we've seen with brands, and maybe not a misconception, but something they sometimes don't fully grasp, is just how powerful social good can be, right? We tapped into that really early. We knew that what actually motivates your average Gen Z consumer is really their affinity to certain causes and helping a certain cause. In a recent study that we ran on our platform, we found that your average Gen Z is 89% more likely to purchase a product, and that brand is really known for supporting different charitable causes. So I think those are really the two biggest things that we see brands kind of the biggest misconceptions or things that sometimes they don't fully grasp is that it's not Gen Z. It's not like there's something on TikTok and they're gonna love it. Like it's a very diverse audience, and social causes are very, very powerful. I think we all saw that this year more than ever before.
Yeah, and I love that. Love that definition because we know Gen Z is the most diverse generation, yet we don't really approach it with that lens of diversity. And oftentimes we think that Gen Z is maybe just a one-track mind and that they're all going to look at things the same way, which certainly there's trends, and you can see that within like purpose-driven purchasing and other arenas, D2C maybe, e-commerce. But it just be, if you were trying to reach a Gen X demographic, let's say just 40 to 50 year olds with a particular product, and you were go to market and conduct an insights report and come back to them and say, hey, well, 40 to 50 year olds are interested in this. They like sports. They probably have kids. It's like, that's a lot of surface level stuff we see in the Gen Z realm that just frankly isn't missing the mark. And that's the reason why, because we approach it as if they all think and do the same when there's so many different realities and niches within that demographic. And, this year in particular, 2020, has certainly been a roller coaster every year. Typically a roller coaster going down. Haven't had a lot of ups, but regardless, we've been making the most of it. And something that we chatted about, I think in July, August, maybe earlier this year, maybe September. My timeline for this year is like totally out of whack. But whenever we spoke on it was some of the things happening within COVID and the trends and insights within the Gen Z realm. So are there any shifts or trends that you think are happening right now in response to COVID that you see as a permanent change? And just as an example, I know we talked about maybe finance in particular as one, like maybe this is another, not just a shakeup from 2008 when we were in elementary school, but this is maybe a much more permanent shakeup at a personal finance level. I know there's a lot of different arenas, but are there any trends you see happening that you're like, I think this is here to stay?
Yeah, absolutely. To your first point, I think this is an absolutely pivotal moment for Gen Z. You're absolutely right. What we chatted about earlier this summer was, if you think about it, for many Gen Zers, it's like the first major global event that they can remember, right? A lot of us, I for sure was very young when 9/11 happened, even when the financial crisis of 2008, I didn't really fully comprehend either one of those events. But I mean, I definitely will never forget COVID and the pandemic this year. It's definitely a very pivotal moment for our generation. And there's two major trends that get me really excited coming out of COVID. So the first one is, and really the pandemic. The first one is this is almost like a no-brainer. It's the entire industry, most industries, especially like industries like retail, have shifted online. Specifically, what I'm really excited about is the rise of social commerce. So we've done a lot of digging into this. I mean, you're seeing it from the big players. Instagram came out with Instagram Shops first. Snapchat is coming out with brand profiles. TikTok, announced a partnership with Shopify earlier this year. It's this kind of the blur of lines between product discovery and social media, which it traditionally has been used for, mostly. You know, most Gen Zers, earlier this year, last year, most of them and most of us are discovering new products on social media. So it's very much a product, a platform for product discovery is now, thanks to technology and some of these major moves made by some of these larger social media platforms, can be the one that it can be kind of the one-stop shop, the destination for all of shopping, everything from product discovery to, a frictionless purchasing experience or purchase experience or buying experience. So, I'm really excited about that. And there's a bunch of different startups playing in that field. We've done a little bit of work there to connecting our influencer platform to, Shopify and diving into, this world of social commerce. But I think it's definitely something to keep an eye out for, especially on platforms like TikTok. And I mean, it makes a lot of sense. The music industry, like so many artists have been born out of TikTok, and now we're seeing it move over to retail, and I think it's going to be very, very powerful. So a lot of brands are already on top of it. I think a lot of people are seeing this, but for the brands that aren't, like, I think the rise of social commerce is definitely something everyone should be paying attention to. The other big trend that we're seeing right now, and we do a lot of work as you guys do as well in beverage, is a shift in eating habits. So what we saw coming out of COVID was a shift towards healthier eating trends, a rise in Gen Z reporting trying, or if not completely converting to vegan lifestyles or vegetarian, or just making sure that they're eating healthier. So again, we're seeing this in the news today too, right? Beyond Meat, Impossible Burgers, like a lot of these healthier alternatives are really on the rise, and a lot of emerging food and beverage brands are kind of a healthier take on, Cheetos, or a healthier take on your traditional comfort snack food. So, those are the two things that we're most excited for, the social commerce and the shift towards healthier eating habits. I think are going to have a huge kind of ripple effect over the next couple of years.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And there's a philosophy when looking at this, because you mentioned, some brands getting into that, but others, maybe lagging here and there. And we've certainly seen a lot of more of your challenger startup brands do an incredible job, and brands rise out of COVID left and right, while a lot of others suffer, even regardless of industry. But there's a philosophy that I've always followed, and I don't know the validity of this, but I'm a big fan of Moore's Law. And Moore's Law is this idea that computing power should double, and there's more details in it, but ultimately it's just like computing power should double every 2 years. So thus, you look at that on a longer term graph, and it accelerates over time like crazy. Well, my notion based on that, you pair that with the speed of technology. We have 5G rolling out. We are the totally phone digitally native, the speed at content in which we watch, which now it's like 15-second TikTok feels like a movie almost, like all these different trends coming together. I'm a big believer in this idea that consumers, especially young consumers, when you factor in also lifespan and the fact that a 2-year change for us is equivalent to maybe 10% of our life, as opposed to 60-year-old only 3%, you do some addition to that formula and then the multiple on top. So my idea is these younger consumers accelerate and change at a much faster pace, and that change is thus accelerated. What's your stance on that? Is it your notion that maybe Gen Z consumers are changing or will adapt at a much faster pace than maybe older demographics?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. So I don't know if I have a stance on it. I do think, just anecdotally, like, it's just watching, like, I have some younger cousins or family friends that are a lot younger than me, like 6 to 10-year-olds, right? Yeah. My 6 to 10-year-old cousin, like, they know how to use an iPad and like navigate an iPad better than even maybe I do. And so, like, it's crazy seeing how quickly younger consumers, I guess it wouldn't be Gen Z in that case, it'd be more Gen A, but this next generation of consumers, they're definitely more proficient in technology than I was, and definitely my parents, my grandparents were from a much earlier age. So I definitely think that could be the case. I guess the one reason I hesitate is like, technology isn't always like an iPad or the internet, right? It can also be railroads and airplanes as well. So I think what we're going to see is, I do think is generations after ours, Gen Z, and the next generation are going to be more open to adapting and accepting new technologies, just because you're like growing up with it from a really young age. It's not foreign, and you're just starting to really immerse yourself at a much earlier age than maybe generations before us. So yeah, 100%. And I think we're starting to see that too, right? When you look at especially the younger segment of Gen Z, there's like very, very like thin lines between your digital self and your physical self, right?
Yeah.
And so you can see like a lot of kind of the social development for these younger Gen Zers are happening. They're making their closest friends while playing, video games, while playing Fortnite and chatting with them on Discord. So like they're building those kind of, everyone's growing up making friends, but they're building their friends on Discord instead of in real life. So it's really interesting to kind of see that play out. And there is like this huge idea between, URL to IRL, bringing these kind of virtual friendships, virtual relationships, virtual experiences to real life. So that's another space that's really interesting. But obviously, who knows what effect COVID would have on that with, not being able to actually be in real life, or making it difficult for large groups of people to be in real life. So I totally agree with you on like, I think the pace at which things are going to accelerate and people are going to accept that definitely has an opportunity here to speed up and accelerate.
Yeah, and I think my favorite example of this is looking at the gaming industry. Booga, the guy that won the Fortnite competition and made all that money, and he was talking about it in an interview. He was asked about like his future career and what's he going to continue to do, and he's like, well, I'm starting to diversify games because I'm a little bit older and they got these young bucks coming in that are just fast, and they're like, wait a sec, you're 19 years old. And then, I go home for Thanksgiving, a holiday or something of that nature, and I even try to play Call of Duty or Fortnite against my 13-year-old brother, and the dude just wipes the floor with me. It's not even close. I can't, and they're on the PC, like they got 9 controls to my like 4, and I'm like, what is going on? But I think that's a really good example where you see like that accelerated technology and their ability to adapt to it is just so much faster. I'm literally like, okay, well, if I ever wanted to become a gamer, I officially can't because I'm 21. I'm too old, which is crazy to think about. But anyway, I think that's an interesting realm, and I love your stance and ideas on that. And so another question I get often from brands that isn't directly asked but is indirectly asked is ultimately like, what's my first step here? What is my first step to start understanding or engaging and reaching Gen Z? Which is a difficult one because there could be internal shifts that have to happen. It could be finding the right agency partner. They got to realign some of their ideas and strategies internally. But from your perspective, what would you advise a brand that they're looking to reach Gen Z, but they don't know where to start? Where would you advise them to start?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think the first part is just understanding your consumer, right? Let's take the gaming example you just shared.
Yeah.
And going back to what I was saying, one of the biggest misconceptions is like, oh, everyone in Gen Z is similar, or just making these kind of blanket statements. If you throw me, I'm 22. If you throw me in front of, someone on like the earlier side of Gen Z, like you were saying with your brother, I half of the time I don't really know I would not know what's going on if you put us both in front of or got us both to play a game of Fortnite. I think it's so diverse. Even the difference between like someone who's just kind of makes it into Gen Z age-wise and someone like on both ends of the spectrum. So I think the first part is just really understanding your consumer. This is what we love doing here at PurPics, is like helping brands do that, right? So you think Gen Z is your target audience? Cool, but like what type of who who within Gen Z, right? Is it someone that's like really excited about outdoors and is a big, natural energy drinker and goes surfing all the time? Or is it, your hardcore gamer that plays video games, the majority of the day? So like, let's really do some research, like let's really understand who your target consumer is, who your ideal consumer is, and let's help you do that. So that's really the first step, is just to really, Gen Z is not, in my opinion, is not like, you need to dig a little bit deeper. It's not, you can't just be Gen Z, it's like dig a little bit deeper and let's figure out who your ideal customer is. And the second thing I would say for brands is like, authenticity is probably the most, if not one of the most, if not the most important.
Couldn't agree more, yeah.
Right? You will get absolutely obliterated on social media if you're trying to flip-flop too much and you don't really have a clear, strong brand and brand voice. So I think it's like, once you understand your consumer, really figure out how you want to brand yourselves to Gen Z. And then finally, and really on that point, it comes to investing in your brand, right? So making sure like you're really putting your money where your mouth is and building a very strong brand. And then finally, the last thing I would say, and this is not really a strategy, but more of just like, I think some brands are doing this really well, others are kind of lagging. It's just being flexible and ready to pounce on these kind of organic trends that are forming in Gen Z, right? Like if you look at the difference between what Sherwin-Williams did versus, Ocean Spray, right? Sherwin-Williams took this like awesome viral content around its brand and capitalize on it, versus like Ocean Spray, as soon as that TikTok started going viral, really leaned into it. So being flexible, being willing to like kind of jump into pop culture and not leverage it, but actually add to it, add value to it as a brand, is incredibly important. So I think a brand that can do those three things really well is going to be pretty successful if they can execute it well with Gen Z.
Yeah, and I love that point, because the reality is, if you were to build a checklist of the 100 traits, characteristics, details you need to have lined up to best engage Gen Z, that might be 100 items, but the reality is there's a core handful, maybe it's 2, maybe it's 3, maybe it's 5, that if you have those, the rest kind of figure themselves out. So I love your point, because if you have authenticity, well, all of a sudden your ability to tell factual stories and to dive into sustainability and to dive into social good and impact, well, that becomes a lot easier, and diversity. And then if you have your connection to the culture and adding to it, well, now all of a sudden your creative and social capabilities are so much higher. So I love that you work on building that fundamental foundation, because I think that's huge. And I would echo all of those points. And my final question I have for you is a little bit more so at a personal level, but ultimately being an entrepreneur, personal level, business, it's one and the same at the end of the day, right? So you're obviously founder of a company. You're in a really, it's a growing market for sure, the Gen Z kind of arena, but it's not one that's fully matured yet. And I think we're still a long ways away from that, and it's still kind of new. Pair with it, the year's 2020, absolute chaos, businesses having trouble left and right. Oh, and by the way, you have your own kind of team, which tends to be maybe younger individuals. You yourself, you're in your 20s. What's the experience been like for you from an entrepreneurial and just a personal standpoint? Because I know I've been asked within the last year, like, hey, I'm thinking about starting this company. What do you think? Like, whatever. And I'm like, you know what? Honestly, if you got to ask me, like, don't do it, because if it needs to itch so bad that you couldn't imagine without it, because it is tough. But that's my standpoint. What's your take on it?
Yeah, man. I mean, I think that's a really good question. It's a really tough question. I think, a little bit about my story. Like, I started this in high school, went to college, did it for a year, and then ended up dropping out. And a lot of it was because I went back to school for like a couple months and then dropped out again.
Yeah.
But the reason for this is like kind of what you were saying. It was this itch, like this entrepreneurial itch. And like I was in class, I wasn't paying attention. Like, I mean, and my grades were so bad. Like that first year, like it was embarrassing.
I got my first ever D ever in my entire life. My second semester at college, and I did the same. I did 1 year, and then I left, and the company just kind of did its thing, and I was like, I'm going all in on this. But it was my only like D or grade below a C in my entire life, and it was a D in sociology, which is pretty much like if you show up, you're gonna get an A, and I just didn't show up. So yeah, I feel you on that.
I mean, there were times where I literally would miss exams because I was traveling. I would go up for a client pitch or an investor pitch, or and I would just miss my finals, and can't really recover from that if you only have 3 major exams. So no, I mean, I think the number one thing is passion, right? Like this is true, especially during COVID, like where things. And actually, let me even take a step back. First of all, I'm incredibly thankful for the experience of being able to run a company and run a company that survives COVID in the first place. I mean, I learned so much this last year as an entrepreneur, as a founder, as a leader. It was like it's like 10 years of experience in 1 year. Like we dealt with stuff that I thought we'd never have to deal with. So like that's the number one thing is like I'm incredibly grateful for this experience. Now I think the biggest thing that I keep going back to is, like you said, you have to have that passion. Like if this isn't something that you love doing and that like you can't not do, as I realized while I was in college, if you don't have that basic, like that's like a foundational thing that you need to have, then yeah, don't start that company, don't drop out of school, don't do that until you find something that truly gets your blood pumping like that. And I think in terms of the experience, like the number one thing I realized, and I already knew this going into COVID, but like it became crystal clear, is like, especially for us, younger founders as well as younger companies, like it really just comes down to the team, man. Like both your employees and your team members, as well as like the greater community of investors, mentors, advisors. I think what I realized really quickly was like we had a rock solid team. We had just an amazing team. We had an amazing ecosystem of mentors, advisors, investors that helped us guide through this. And that's one of the things that I think, going back to my experience, especially this year, incredibly grateful for, because when times are tough and you have the ability of just like being able to just trust this person so much that, hey, we're going to make it through this, just believe me, like let's do it, let's figure it out. And having multiple of those people, it's like, it's really hard to fail when you have so many really smart, trustworthy people having your back and as committed to it as you are. And so, yeah, that is one of the things that I'm most excited about as a founder, as a young founder, and just as an entrepreneur in general, is we have an awesome team. We really care about what we're doing, and we're really passionate about it as well. And it's been a journey. It's been a journey, and it's exciting to see so many other Gen Z entrepreneurs out there. There's so many people doing some really cool stuff. I mean, I don't know if you saw the Forbes 30 Under 30 came out yesterday. I was going through all of them, and I was like, oh my God, there's like a ton of young entrepreneurs out there, and it's just so cool being part of that generation and kind of that movement of hustlers.
I know, I was totally fanboying. I was like, oh my God, I know that guy. I know that guy. I know that girl. Like, holy shit. Wait, I just talked to them last week. That's insane. I was like, so yeah, I mean, that's incredible. And I couldn't agree more. I think the team, something I always emphasize to our team, which is just like, when we say like we're trendsetters, there's a reason we're not like Bajor Seth Media. We're not Ogilvy or Vayner or whatever. It's because we want to be this collective of trendsetters. And I'm always like, look guys, like, and fortunately for us, throughout COVID, our business has actually just gone up through that, not necessarily because of COVID, but kind of just indirectly, like how things have played out. And something I've really illustrated to the team is like, look, our entire industry could be dead tomorrow. Say they get rid of all the social media platforms. Say they wipe the entire Gen Z generation. They're like, hey, if you're Gen Z, you have to move to a different country, get out of here. We're done. Like no more of you. Like whatever radical, insane, or we're sending you to Mars, Elon Musk, right? But whatever it is, I'm like, oh, look, that could happen we will go sell shoes, or we will go sell t-shirts, or we will go do this, or we will do consulting here, or we will go create our own social media platform, but we will go do and find something else because I know this team is what ultimately matters and drives it more so than even like the business. Because if you have the right people on the bus, that matters a lot more than the map or directions you have on that bus. Now, certainly it helps to have a roadmap and like to know where you're going, but yeah, I'm a huge believer in that. Like if you surround yourselves with a badass team, the rest kind of almost resolves itself.
Yeah, 100%. And I mean, we saw it like again, COVID in a very drastic way. Like massive billion-dollar businesses have to shift their strategies, their business models, their products. And like as small startups, like we were kind of having a similar discussion, which is, and I shared with you, how we did a pretty big evolution of our platform over these last couple of months. It's just being open to what the market says. At the end of the day, the market is always right. And if we find that because of X event, or maybe we just read the market completely wrong, and this is what the market actually wants, then we kind of we have to be flexible. We have to be willing to kind of move in that direction. So yeah, and COVID again, like it just accelerated that. It just needed to happen on a grander scale, which is both incredibly exciting because doors open that would never have opened up for us because of the pandemic, but it was also going to be very stressful and frustrating because a lot of doors were closed that not were open. So it kind of goes both ways. But super grateful for the experience, excited for next year, and I think we were able to make it out a stronger and better company, and it seems like you guys were as well. And I think it says a lot about kind of our companies, but also about our generation in terms of being super agile and just hustling and figuring it out.
Yeah, I love that, man. Well, for our listeners here that have now tuned in and have listened to your guidance and insight, and are now like, okay, well, this guy is way cooler about Gen Z. I'm going to follow him and get rid of Jake, which is probably the majority of listeners right now. Where can they find you? More info on PurPics. Where should we send them?
Yeah, well, definitely keep listening to Jake. You have a lot of wisdom to drop, but you can find us. The best place to check us out for insights, for the latest updates about the company is on Twitter at PurPics Official, at LinkedIn at PurPics, and then on Instagram at PurPics Official. So check us out there. We actually have some really big news dropping in the next couple of weeks in January. So follow us there, stay up to date, and we're always excited to share what we're learning about Gen Z. And thanks again for having me, Jake. It was a lot of fun chatting with you.
It was a pleasure. Thank you all for tuning in, and I will see you all next time. It's a wrap.